So we have the pleasure of Kathleen Peterson again with us, who has joined us once before when she talked about burnout and the use of the temperament framework that she does working with leadership. Just to recap, Kathleen is a clinical psychologist with a PhD in clinical Christian counseling and has worked with leaders and intuitive leadership for the last 8 years. She's written a number of source materials, and as well as that, teaches in over 8 different countries on this material. So Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you today.
So we're just going to dive straight into talking about where we are now, 2 years into a pandemic. And so just give me a sense of what's happening in the ground around you, Kathleen. And that's just to say Kathleen is in Florida.
Yes, I live in Central Florida, not too far from Orlando in the Cape Canaveral area where the space program is. Here we're in a pretty conservative area of the United States. And so we have seen this an interesting thing in terms of where COVID has been. It's been one of the states that was the hardest hit with COVID, has one of the highest death rates in the United States, following New York, California, but Florida, because it is a tourist destination, it's a hub. Our hospitals have been in this area maxed out in the past year and a half. Things are starting now to find their way to settle. But it has been a couple of really tough years around here. Everybody has had to readjust. And then, of course, with all the political upheaval that the US has lived in for the last couple of years, with an election in the middle of a pandemic, there has been just a lot of uncertainty, high unemployment. Things are starting to now go back up again. People are starting to get jobs. There were situations because the unemployment benefits were higher than minimum wage during the pandemic. People were quitting their jobs because they would earn more sitting at home than working at a fast food place or working in a market, in a grocery store, something like that. Yeah. So that has created, there is this uncertainty about the virus. Do we get the vaccine? Do we not get the vaccine? Which vaccine? The war of whether we should mandate vaccines, that is at a very high level right now here. It's creating division in families, communities. So that's kind of the between the fear of the illness itself, the fear of the government mandates, and all of the political and financial, has created just this perfect storm of anxiety and stress for people to be living in at this time.
Which I guess has a huge impact on the area that you work in. Your workload must have exploded.
It did. I don't think I have ever done as much counseling as I am doing right now. In fact, probably about a year ago, I was seeing counselees on a daily basis during the work week and on Saturdays, because people who were working regular work schedules, needed to see me at night or on the weekend, till I reached a point where I was physically becoming ill. And I had to put boundaries in terms of how many people I could see, how many days a week I could psychologically, emotionally, and physically handle, because it was really beyond my limit. And I'm pretty tenacious. I have a tendency to push beyond my limits, but for my own health, I had to begin to put limits. And every counselor that I work with and that I know has been saying the same thing. We have Everybody's like reached the max of what they can do, and having to learn to say no.
Yeah.
Has not been always easy.
And in the period you've still been teaching as well.
Yes,
Are
I'm
you,
teaching.
are you saying anything different to the people that who are coming up, or to how you address this, or perhaps a different way of approaching the situation?
We have a lot of examples now to use in our teaching. We have a
Absolutely.
lot of case studies very present, especially because stress, and there's a lot of factors that are causing stress. There's external causing things that are causing stress, but there are internal things that are causing stress. Really brings out in most people their worst version, the worst version of themselves rather than the best version. We would like to think romantically that, oh, it will purify us, it will refine us like fire. And sometimes it gets really ugly before we're refined. It gets,
Sadly so.
yeah, we kind of have to confront the worst version of ourselves before we can work on that in order to present the better version of who we are.
So I guess what you're saying as well is that some of you're faced with this wall of people who have great needs, and yet
Yeah.
I guess part of it is saying to people on the other side of that wall, you need to also put those self-protective pieces in place. Otherwise,
Yes.
not only will they fall, but you will also face danger of ill health, etc. as well.
Exactly. We have one of my main clientele are people who are religious leaders, who are faith-based leaders. And just to give you an example there of where I've had to work with many of them to establish healthy parameters in their life is the number of funerals that they have had to do over the past year has been, incredibly high. Losing friends, family members, as well as congregants as well. And then they have to get up and present hope, and they have to get up and smile, and they have to get up and be okay. And to help them create spaces where they can be truly authentic and human and share. And this is true of any leadership is, there is a time we have to put on a mask and we have to smile and we have to stand up and present hope, even when in our hearts we're doubting.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And do you teach people any particular sort of practice or practices or rituals, exercises, anything along those lines?
yes, we do. It's really based on their temperament. We have an instrument that we use. It's called an Arno profiling system, APS for short. And when I do this, this measures how a person's natural core wiring functions in three areas, three arenas of life. And once I have that, then I and my team help that person identify strategies that work specifically for them. For example, for you and I, we have different temperaments. And so what would work for you would have exactly the opposite effect for me.
Even though we're facing a similar situation.
Exactly. Right. Because we may be facing the similar, but our fear base is unique to how we're wired, to our experiences too, but in a lot of ways, how we're wired from birth. And so the strategies will be unique to each temperament, each wiring. For example, in the social area of my temperament, not in the other two, but in my social area of my temperament, I'm an introvert. And so what I need to really work on is pulling away, having time alone, time of longer times of meditation, longer times of reading, studying, this kind of thing. A person, for example, like my daughter, who is an extreme extrovert, she needs to connect with people. And so for her, she will connect on social platforms when she can't meet with them. She will connect, which exhausts me. I mean, even the thought of that, having to connect like that is exhausting to me, but that fills her up. And so like her strategy and my strategy in order to lower the stress level is going to be very different, because she's an extreme extrovert and I'm an introvert. And that's in this social area of our temperament.
And the other two, can you just remind us what those two are, Kathleen?
Okay, so the three areas we have is what's called inclusion, which who you include, how many people you need to include into your circle. So we have the social. The second area we have is the area of control and responsibility, how we handle the pressure of responsibilities, control, when something officially becomes our responsibility, what do we do with that? How much control do we need over that? So you can imagine people like me I have the temperament that has the highest level of need to control my environment. And we have lived with completely out of control. So it creates a unique struggle in me. And then the third area that we measure is affection and love, how love is expressed and received. And of course, in that area, which, if you think about it, it's the party, work, and home. If you think of the home, how many of us have gone, well, I haven't seen my siblings in 2 years.
Yeah.
I haven't seen my younger two sisters. I've seen my brother, but I haven't seen my younger two sisters in 2 years because one of my sisters has a chronic illness. And so she's in complete isolation. And I long to see my sister. I long to be with her and spend time with her. I can't. Even though I'm vaccinated, but because of her health issues, she's in isolation. So those are the three areas. And the pandemic and the world crisis, the domino effect of the pandemic, which we've seen in all kinds of areas, that affects all three areas of our temperaments. Everything in who we are has been affected by it.
Yeah, I can well imagine it would, for sure. So that the pandemic goes way beyond whether or not you are affected by a virus physically.
Exactly.
Just if we could pick a scenario, for example, say, now I don't know how much of a lockdown you've had in your part of the world. In the UK, there has been a lockdown. So let's just imagine there is a lockdown going on, or there has been a lockdown going on. I am not going to the office at all. I am not traveling by public transport. I'm not going shopping as much as I used to. I do everything online. My shopping, my social, my interactions, my work interactions, as we are doing right now over technology. How do you see that working out in terms of those three areas? Can you just give me an example, let's say, either for yourself or somebody who's just, one of the temperaments that you've had to work through?
So when we're working with temperaments, I mentioned to you the three areas of temperament. We work with 5 different temperaments in these 3 areas. A person can have a combination of 4 temperaments within their makeup. So there are people who have one temperament, the same in all 3 areas. My brother's that way. He's melancholy in all 3 areas. Everywhere you go, anytime you see him, he is 100% melancholy. For me, it's in fact, I've had people say to me, you're an enigma to me, because in one arena you act this way, in a different arena you act another. And it's because of my temperament in the way that I'm wired at this core value. So what we end up seeing is that each one of these has been responding to the lockdown, to quarantine in a different way. I'll give you an example of myself versus a friend of mine. In the area of inclusion, which is a social area, I am, as I mentioned, an introvert. I have a colleague who she is sanguine compulsive. Sanguine compulsive is a person who has a very high need for socialization. She needs a lot of contact. She needs to change her environment on a regular basis. She needs to see people, interact with people. She needs to experience her five senses, for her to feel full, for her to feel like life is happy and full and at its best. She needs to taste different foods, go different places. And I love all that. I love to travel. I love to see, but for her, it's vital for her. It's her lifeline. For me, who's an introvert, though I love to go to different restaurants. I love to travel. I love all that kind of things because I do have some sanguine in me in another area. But the lockdown was not difficult. When I got to stay at home, I was traveling to making about 11 trips a year internationally, staying gone from home 2 to 3 weeks at a time, every single trip. I've gotten to stay home for 2 weeks with my puppy and thoroughly enjoyed. I was working on my PhD. I was able to finish my PhD and graduate. Didn't get to walk, didn't get to wear the funny hat, but I did get to, I finished my studies. This time has been great for my husband and I because he also is a melancholy and inclusion. And for us, that part did not cause anxiety. What causes anxiety for the melancholy is the uncertainty of the future. It's the economic, okay, how are we going to pay the bills? What's going to happen to our jobs? Which is not what my sanguine friend, who is our opposite, because it's like the temperaments have direct opposites. My sanguine friend colleague called me one day and she says, I can't stop crying. This was about 3 months into lockdown. And she says, I have never been a crybaby. I've never been this person who cries all the time. And I just can't stop crying. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? She says, I have to work with my teams through a screen. I can't see them. I can't touch them. I have not left the four walls of my house in 3 months. I literally feel like I'm going to bounce off the walls of my home. And so the strategy that I had to do for her, because she needed that interaction, was, well, are you allowed to go to the park and walk outdoors in the open air? She says, well, I'm allowed to every other day for 2 hours with a mask on. And in her country, she had to wear gloves because this was here in the States, we were never required to wear gloves, but she was. So I said, do that, even if it's just, walking around the park and seeing the trees and hearing the birds, and, go out in your back porch. Don't stay inside. Go into your patio, go on the balcony, go into the yard. Don't stay within the four walls. Because this was causing her such incredible stress. She was even thinking, and I actually have had 2 or 3 clients who went to psychiatrists and got drugs because they thought that something was wrong with them chemically. And it wasn't chemical. It was that their temperament was starving to death.
That's really, really insightful to be able to looking at each individual sort of makeup and the situations, and then try to come up with a strategy that fits the individual. So very often, like I say, there is no one size that fits all. But if you can work out enough of it to say, right, well, this is a broad area, we can narrow it down to something specific and then start to play around the edges as how you can make that happen to fit your situation.
Right. I had mentioned to you in our last encounter that the instrument we use it comes out with a numerical factor at the end, that those of us who are trained to use it know how to read the chart and the numbers. And perhaps we can show it here, this chart with the bars and the numbers on it. The possible combinations of numerically of temperaments, when you consider the 3 areas with the 5 temperaments, are 4,272 possible combinations.
So no chance for me, whose math skills are kind of approaching 0.
No. So when you consider, okay, let's consider me. I am 1 in 4,272 people just with my temperament. I'm a woman, which is going to create now a difference in expression of that core temperament. I was raised in Central America in a Latin community with North American parents. I was raised in a faith community. I have a level of education that's different than others. My experiences, I went through some traumas as a child with the death of my mother at a young age, made an influence. All of those things started forming and creating. And when you start adding all of those factors in, each person is absolutely unique.
Mm.
And that's why the strategy, we can give general strategies which are helpful, but it's almost like what I explain is a toolbox, and you have to figure out which tool works.
Yeah.
Is it a nail or is it a screw? What do you need? Do you need the hammer? Do you need the screwdriver? And that'll be in part determined by your temperament.
So that brings home the other kind of very, very valid point is that if you're trying to do this in isolation, it is, I hesitate to use the word impossible, because I think everything is possible, but it might take you a bit longer to work out what it is. So very often it's that we need each other to work this out, because if you're all doing it in isolation, we'd be introverted through and through in all or the whole spectrum.
Right. And we really can't learn from others. Our whole learning process has been because somebody else has done the studies. Yeah. And we're piggybacking on, we're standing on I always tell the people that I mentor and that I coach, stand on my shoulders. You don't have to start from zero. You can learn from my mistakes. You can learn from my successes, so that you start ahead of time. And that's where I think, as you're saying, reaching out and letting somebody else kind of talk you through, even if you are an introvert. There are some people who are compulsive, what we call compulsive, and it's not a negative thing. It's their wiring. It's a classification of how introverted you are or extroverted you are, because it's literally a spectrum from compulsive introvert to compulsive extrovert, and with no judgment of that. This is just a calling it what it is, not saying this is bad or this is good. But all of us need to hear from somebody who has some experience, who knows how to do this, who can help you see the areas of internal conflicts and external conflicts that you may have. Because some of the conflicts that causes stress, that causes depression, that causes high levels of anxiety are because internally I'm at war with what's happening. That it could be like, for me with my temperament, is the lack of control that we have. For others is the we have no sense of what tomorrow, we can't count on tomorrow. And for people like phlegmatics, which is another one of the temperament, who need consistency, they thrive on consistency. They thrive on order. And when there is no consistency and there's no order and things change, I don't know if for you all in Europe, things are changing at the velocity that it is here. But here it's like, you know, you go to bed and they tell you one thing and the next day, you know, the CDC here had us all over the place, like a yo-yo at the beginning of COVID. It's like, wear masks, don't wear masks.
Yeah.
You know, 14 days, 10 days. I mean, even now it's like, well, if you've been vaccinated, how many days should you be in quarantine versus not? You know, can you spread the COVID virus? Can you not spread? All of that back and forth for 2 of the 5 temperaments just causes literally to the point of panic attacks, which we're seeing the level of people, the number of people with panic attacks exponentially increasing, because these people who have temperaments that need that solid consistency right now are the whole world is moving under their feet.
So you just 2 of the 5 need that
Consistency.
of the 3 remaining. Do they deal with it differently than uncertainty?
Could you repeat that again? It cut off, so I didn't hear the question.
Sorry. How do the other 3 of the 5 deal with the high uncertainty? Are they better equipped to deal with it?
Well, it depends on what part of all of what we are living we are talking about in terms of dealing with. So if we are talking about the isolation, there's one temperament that highly struggles with it, which is the sanguine. The rest of them suffer, but not to the same extent. If we are talking about the constant change, the sanguine and the choleric deal with that much better than the other temperaments do. So each one of it kind of depends. And this is why all of us are being attacked and nobody is escaping what we've lived. I mean, there is literally no one who's escaping, because if it doesn't get you in one area, like, oh, well, I can deal with change really well, because I am sanguine or I'm choleric. So I can go with the flow. I adjust. For example, cholerics, which is what I am in the area of control and responsibility, we think fast, we respond fast, we adjust. We're very quick at adjusting. You throw me a curveball, I'll catch it. I can hit it out of the park kind of thing, but that I can handle. What I can't handle is that I have no control of what's happening around me. I have no control of the world. So even though I can handle the curveballs, that isn't what takes the rug out of under my feet. It's the fact that this is totally out of my control. I can't fix this.
Yeah.
Clerics are fixers. We fix things. If it's broken, we find a way to get it fixed.
So does that, in my way of thinking, emphasize the teamwork aspect of life?
Absolutely. Because when you're working within a team, when you're working in the context of teams, one of the things that you do is, and I do this with my teams, is one of them says, I can't deal with all these changes. Somebody else on the team goes, look, let me take the lead right here. I'm okay. I can handle these changes. Let me maneuver us through this. And then when we get on the other side of it, you step back in again.
So that's a bit like agile leadership,
yes.
where
yeah.
And that I guess involves some sort of I don't know if the word is humility or the word is being able to release ego, something to allow this flexibility of leadership to happen.
Right. It requires humility. It requires keeping your eye on what the goal is.
Yeah.
You know, if I am, let's say I'm running a company and my goal is there's a certain level of productivity I need to give. You do what you need to do to make that happen. And if I'm the best person at this moment in time today to do that, then I'm going to step forward and do that. If there's somebody else who is going to be able to move us the next 3 steps, then I need to be able to be flexible enough, to be humble enough, and to be strategic enough. And all of that, it will depend too on your temperament as to which word I'll use. So if I were with someone one-on-one, I would choose the word, the correct word that would resonate with their temperament to say, tap in on the strategy of letting this person take the lead for this period of time. And they go, oh, that is strategic. I can do that.
So there are certain words that are resonant to each
temperament.
Each temperament.
There's one temperament which is called the supine. You'll say you will help. You will be an asset, and you will help if you do this. Oh, okay, yes. Why? Because at the core, I want to help.
If I remember correctly, is that the same temperament that doesn't want to drive the bus?
Correct.
So,
that's the same, unless they understand that driving the bus is helpful.
Yeah, so it's coming from that approach of being helpful as opposed to here's the steering wheel and you get a help or a scream of I can't do this.
Exactly. You know, if they see it as contributing to, as this is for the common good, then they can take that leadership role. It will eventually, if they have to stay there too long, it will eventually start breaking down something in them, unless they can keep coming back to this is helping, this is making a difference in people's lives. So each one of them, so for like the supine, it's the helping. For the choleric, it's the vision, it's the keep in mind the final goal, because cholerics always think 2 to 3 steps ahead. You know, what is the final goal of this? I've got a goal that I'm going for. What is that? That will be true for them. For a melancholy, it's about what truth is, what integrity, when they're really functioning in their best. It's quality. It's we've got to make, we have to present the best quality, and this is what's necessary to present good quality, a good quality product. Or service, or whatever your area of work is. For the phlegmatic is really focused on justice and balance. This is going to help bring balance. This is going to bring true equality, true justice. Phlegmatics tend to be very focused on kind of the social concepts of equality, and we need to treat people, with honesty and with integrity, and not, it's usually the phlegmatics who will stand up and say it's not fair that women are paid less than men, or that a person of color is paid less than a person. Why? Because that's a core value in who they are. And then the sanguine, which is the fifth one, is really focused on relationship. What is the best thing for the relationship? How are we going to get along well? How are we going to get, and it's really based on the relationship concept. And so as you see with all of those different core values, each one coming from a different angle, even the language that you use in leadership, the language you use in temperament coaching, is all going to be based on how that person is wired at the core of who they are.
Yeah. So that's really useful from a work perspective, Kathleen. what would you say to people in the home environment now in terms of being stuck with the person that you used to like better at the start than at the end?
Oh, these last 2 years have been tough
Yeah.
on relationships. Some relationships have really found each other again.
Yeah.
And, I know of couples who have fallen in love again, who have, this has given them an opportunity to rekindle and reprioritize that thing that when you get to the end of your life gives you a sense of value, gives you a sense of purpose, which is family. It really is. So for some people, this has been very positive. For others, especially, and we've seen this in a lot of the couple counseling that I've done, is that for years, they were busy doing their tasks. They get up, have breakfast in the morning, one would make the coffee, hand the coffee, kiss on the cheek, out the door. Come in at the end of the evening. If there's kids in the house, get the kids to bed, help them with their homework, read whatever report you have for the next day, a kiss goodnight, roll over, go to sleep. And they did this for years, and they've done this for years. And then all of a sudden they were stuck together and they've never dealt with the issues of the relationship themselves. And then each is stressed out, is individually stressed out, because people are worried about the future. They're worried about their health. None of us have been untouched by the death of COVID. I doubt that there's one person listening to this who can't say, I know somebody who died. All of us know somebody who's died of COVID in this last year. And if it's not COVID, it's something else because they haven't been to the doctor for 2 years and haven't been taking care of themselves. I just had a friend this week pass away from a heart attack. Hasn't seen a doctor in 2 years because we've been in lockdown, hadn't been taking care of himself or taking his medicine. And so you have all of this is going on individually in the person, and then not communicating, not understanding the wiring of their partner, of their spouse, or their children, and not resolving and not talking about the toxic things, the uncomfortable subjects. And it's created just this incredible response. Last night, I had the opportunity to do a workshop in Brazil through Zoom. And one of the things that in the statistics that I pulled up from this year was in 2020 and 2021, the divorce rate in the country of Brazil jumped 75%.
Wow, that is high.
It was a 75% jump in divorce. In the US, it has gone up, but it's hard to get a clear idea because there are so many couples who now live together without marrying. And so there's no civil record of the split. So I know of couples who have been cohabitating or living in a partner relationship that have split, but because there's no record of it civilly, we don't, the statistics aren't clear in terms of what the percentage is here in the States, but it's high.
So is there any sort of general advice or comments you can give people to at least start the ball rolling to bring that healing or repair back into the home?
It's finding again a point of connection. It's I was working with a couple this year that COVID actually boiled to the surface the problems that were always hidden. Yeah. And one of the things that they had that really came out was that they had been so busy in their work and raising children that they had lost connection and intimacy. They had lost, and I'm not talking about the physical intimacy. I'm talking about emotional intimacy. And so we've had to go through processes of forgiveness where they've had to learn to forgive each other, to speak the words of, learn to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Begin to say, I'm frustrated. So one of the things that we're seeing is that everybody's frustrated. They go home and somebody becomes a scapegoat, whether it's the dog, they kick the dog, or they scream at the spouse, or they scream at the children. Why? And none of them had anything to do with the stress.
Yeah.
Instead of coming home and saying, I really had a stressful day. Today work was really intense. It was really hard. And, can you give me a little bit of space? Or I need a few minutes. And in a nice way, in a polite way, courtesy. Just, we forget to be courteous to the people we're married to. And so, just courtesy, beginning with that. And then, so one of them is communicating the point of your stress. So instead of coming in and as the idiom goes, kicking the dog, is telling the dog or the children or the spouse, it's been a rough day. And assigning the stress to where the stress is coming from, naming it. The second thing is to find something in common. One of the things that I'm finding very effective is asking couples to read a book together. There's, for example, there's a book called Emotionally Healthy Leadership by Peter Scassero. And I'll ask couples to read that book together separately. So each one of them is reading the book, and then once a week they have a dinner together and they talk about what they've been reading. So it gives them a point that's not one of the toxic things.
Yep.
It's not about the money, it's not about, it's something other, in order to connect, to begin to reconnect where things have disconnected through the years. And that works very effectively, especially once forgiveness is given, where there's areas of this hurt, but I choose to forgive.
Yeah. That's really powerful, that the idea of you're bringing that spiritual dimension into a mental and a physical space. So
right.
that we are connecting at a much deeper level, and
exactly
opening up and being vulnerable. If you say, well, this is the stress that I'm feeling, or this is the cause of the stress, which is emotional vulnerability as well. So that
it is.
just to be able to say that, I guess even when you're if you'd be bumping into the person as they leave this part of the room and you're in this part of the room, and you to be able to do that while locked together, it is an important tool in itself.
Yes, it really is. And even, it's important to be able to have the vulnerability, to exercise courtesy, to exercise respect, because sometimes it's really sad that sometimes the person that we most disrespect is the person we most love.
That in itself, is huge. That is that, you think, from taking them for granted, or?
Yes, absolutely. It's from taking them for granted. It's for, they're there, they're not going anywhere. I can, I can use and abuse them and they're not leaving. Well, the divorce rate right now shows that it doesn't mean they're not going to leave. It's a different and besides, it doesn't matter. My husband and I made an agreement when we got married, and it was a discussion we had when we were engaged, is The way we referred to it was for the blueprints of our marriage. This is the way we described it. For the blueprints of our marriage, there will be no back door to get out. Divorce is not a back door available to us. And it was easy through the early years of marriage to just say, well, I'm secure here. He's not going anywhere. So it doesn't matter how I act.
Yeah.
And not realizing that, wow, wait a minute, this is a person that I committed my life to. This is the person that I said I most love, that I chose above all other men. In my, in my circle. And now I'm disrespecting him. I'm being uncourteous. So things as simple as remembering to say please and thank you. Remembering to say, this was good job. Also being honest in a polite way, in a generous way with what we don't like. It bothers me when you do that. Would you do me a favor and not, please don't do that again. Because this is uncomfortable. And so sometimes we can go the other extreme to where it's all nice, but we're not dealing with the things that do bother us. It makes me uncomfortable that you're, talking to, if a husband says to his wife, it makes me uncomfortable that you're talking to another man for 2 hours on the phone. That makes me, he's got to be able to say that, and doing it in a way. And I always ask, one of the ways that I ask my counselees is, when they tell me of something that happened, I said, well, if you were to switch places and your spouse would have treated you as you treated them, would you have been okay with it?
Yeah.
And usually right there, I don't have to say anymore. That pretty much, I don't have to call them out on it. I don't have to scold them. Just that pretty much, no, I would not have tolerated that.
Yeah. And a lot of what you're saying sounds very simple and very easy, but it's just we've either forgotten how to be polite or how to be courteous, how to express what your needs are, how to express what your emotions are, your opinions are,
Exactly.
in an appropriate manner.
Right. And some of that will be that we forgot along the way. Some of it will be because in our family of origin, we were taught incorrect patterns.
Yeah.
You'll see that a lot of times where especially with family with gag rules, that you don't talk about certain things.
Yeah.
Or you're taught to express anger by throwing things rather than constructively using your words.
Yeah.
And so all of those things play in, and sometimes you have to unlearn and relearn communication techniques in order to be able to express yourself in effective, life-giving ways to your relationships, to yourself, to your family system, to your work system, to your social system.
So I guess for me, it one positive takeaway from it would be that here's an opportunity for all of us to relearn these things, or unlearn the bad, unlearn the unhelpful, and take that opportunity to even do the refresher course in please
Yes.
may I.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you. All
Exactly.
of those simple things that we all could do with a refresher every now and then, especially when the heat is on in different aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. When I got married, we had as part of our vows was the vows that my grandfather wrote for my grandparents or for my parents years ago, and it was the 10 Commandments of marriage. And it was interesting because in them were courtesy, compliments, working on compatibility, finding those moments, those moments where you find areas where you're compatible and connect in those compatible areas, and then giving grace where you aren't. You give grace where you're not. And it's interesting because through the years, everyone and all of my siblings and my children have all used the same vows, the same 10 commandments of marriage. And it's funny because as we all get together for family events, sometimes we remember, oh yeah, I remember this one and I remember this one. And so as I'm sharing with you, it's not only my studies, my doctoral studies that is coming to fruition, but it's the example that was given in our family, and even the core of the relationship is these core 10 principles that we long to live out in our marriage, and among them is courtesy.
Yep. And that's so really important that you've whether you've had to or you wanted to or you needed to, you've had this framework running through your life.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good to be able to share that with people, because not everybody have had this to lean on when things are a bit rocky. You think, oh yes, well, here's the framework that I'm leaning on. This is right. Important to me.
Yes, and that's where reaching out to somebody to help.
Yeah.
Is it go, wow, I didn't have this framework. My family of origin, my system that I grew up in was so unhealthy and was not, it didn't produce life. It produced insecurity. It produced low self-esteem. It produced lack of value in who we are. And I need to do better for me and for the future generations of my family. And that's where you reach out and you read and you talk to people and you grow and you do the workshops and you practice and practice and practice till you get it.
And then you share it.
And then you share it.
Yeah. Kathleen, it's been fabulous talking with you. It's been good to reconnect and also to hear of the work that you've been doing. But I'm sure this is of huge value to many people who are listening or watching. Just as we end, can you just tell us where we can find you on the internet, online?
I am right now. Our online presence is based it's a religious faith-based platform for now. We do plan in 2021 to establish a second platform for a corporate platform. Mm-hmm. So, but you can find me now. It's at Erin, the name Erin and her HUR International Ministries, if you look that up, or just the initials, AHIM Inc. Incorporated. If you look us up, you can see there some of the work we're doing in the faith-based community. And some of that is being repeated in corporate communities as well. But my contact information is there. And regardless, and also whatever language you have, you can, if you're somebody who your base language is Spanish, Portuguese, I'm completely bilingual. I'm Spanish, English bilingual. I grew up, my first language was actually Spanish. I was educated in English, but the first language I spoke was Spanish. So we provide, our organization actually provides counseling in 3 different languages, which is English, Spanish, and Portuguese. I don't do counseling in Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. I only do Spanish and English. So we're there. And if somebody's interested in understanding temperament, how they're created, coming up with strategies that are custom fit to who they are, understanding what that intuitive leadership in them is. So they're functioning from something that's intuitive versus counterintuitive, which is how we work with leaders, is how do you lead in a way that's intuitive to you? Because there are many people who can read, let's say, John Maxwell, and it resonates with them. For me as a choleric, John Maxwell resonates with me because he's choleric. It's a perfect fit. But for others, it doesn't resonate with them because their leadership, their intuitive leadership style is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so making those connections, and that's what we aim to, it's how we seek to and aim to serve and to help the community.
Yeah. I think what you say is valid. Whatever belief anyone has, or whether you have some belief or no belief, whether you have some faith or no faith, or anywhere in between, that the principles that we've talked about and you shared are universal because we are human.
Exactly.
Whether or not we have the same value in terms of belief. And so I think that's important to say as we end this now, that Kathleen, it's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. It's really been a privilege and a lot of fun. I love to talk about temperament. I love to talk about, because I know it, understanding this brings life. So for me, it's a great joy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. And we will see you sometime when we can in the rail.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Bye-bye.